Alrighty folks, to get started, I've already primed this entire model in black, so we're going to jump right into the dry brushing. You've seen me do this before in my other videos, but let's just do it again because this is a great technique, especially if you're doing any kind of base with concrete or stone or anything. We're just dry brushing with grays, starting with a dark gray and working our way up to lighter gray tones until we have a finished base, which we can then start adding color and other details to. In this case, we're going to be adding in this green to the vines that are on the base here because, well, it's covered in vines and we have some plants that are going to be growing out of this base. What am I doing here? I'm taking some Citadel green paint, which for those of you who don't know, the Citadel contrast paints are actually a translucent paint, and that's what I'm painting over those highlights that we used earlier, created earlier with the dry brush. So what you get is a nice green look because we dry brushed over a lighter tone. Now, here I'm doing the same thing. I'm dry brushing the plant that's going to be in here, and this is one of the alive plants, if you will, because I think she had like died with snakes or something, so somebody can go ahead and check me on that. But I remember from the movies, and they turned into these like flowers with the teeth. So I'm dry brushing all of these plant parts, and I'm doing it for the same reason I did on the gray base. What we're doing is we're creating areas of shadow, areas of highlight. In other words, we're creating contrast just using black and white, because there's no greater contrast than black and white when it comes to painting. So what that does is it allows us to have a nice base to then paint our translucent paints over, like these Citadels. This is the same color I used on the vines. I'm just spraying it out of an airbrush, and you can see how with the ferns, the leaves, the white is lighter and the black is darker. Now here, for this little bit, I'm actually using a militarum green for the kind of stem or stalk, and I'm just doing that to add a little bit of, contrast to the green, so it's not all one flat color. And you can see I'm still using an airbrush, and the reason I'm doing that is because I've already dry brushed both of these parts. And when you dry brush both parts, what you're doing again is you're creating that contrast, and the white is only going to cling to the raised details of your piece, and that's why dry brushing is a great way to start. Zenithal will get you so far, but when it comes to these little details, a zenithal will actually fill in those details. So a dry brushing works a lot better in this specific example, again because there's a lot of little details just in the stalk itself and with the leaves. Now you can see I used the same green as I did earlier on those leaves, and then for the head I'm using these shades of red you see behind you, the Flesh Terrors red, as the base coat because it's darker, and then I'm essentially giving it like a zenithal highlight a little bit with the ball red. And what that does is give us more contrast. Remember, if we want something to look cool and look realistic or just be really flashy to the eyes, we want something that has a lot of contrast because our eyes are drawn to contrast, not flat colors. So after painting all those colors, we got down to the teeth, which we're going to paint with a brush. And as you can see, I'm just using like a light, I think it might even be deck tan or a light off-white color to fill in those teeth. And is it time consuming? Yes, but look how good that looks when it's done. And it might take you an extra coat or two to get those results, but it looks really good. So last thing I had to do was go back over these vines, and this was really good practice and to kind of set the stage and set the mindset for what's coming up on Poison Ivy herself, because she is covered in vines, and I can tell you that I spent the most amount of time painting vines on this model. I think all in I spent about 10 hours just painting vines on Poison Ivy. So here we can see how this base comes together, sets right in place here. It looks really great. Special thank you to my patrons that support my work. If you're interested in daily vlogs, how-to videos, high-resolution photos, early access videos, discounts at my store, and free printable files, check out my Patreon and see how you can get exclusive access to all this extra content. With the base out of the way, we can move on to Poison Ivy herself. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by painting all the skin tones white. I'm just using a white ink. Really, you can use any white color, just get it white. Now, in this case, her arms I did all completely white because her arms are up in the air, but you can do a zenithal at this point as well. though you can just paint the entire skin tones white. So your question you might ask is, well, why not just prime in white? You can, but I chose to use white and do a zenithal. Now, what I'm doing after the white, and the reason we do white, is because we want to come back with pink. And you can put pink over the entire thing too. So again, if you want to, you can just prime in white and then do this pink zenithal, because the idea is to create the lighter skin tones using pink as a base color. Once we have the pink down, and again, I prefer to do pink with a zenithal, so in other words, we're going to bring in the airbrush from the top, creating like a natural lighting effect. And then I use this skin ink, this is skin ink from AK, so this is like a dark red ink that I'm spraying in all of the shadowed areas of her body here. So again, this is an ink, but if you have any kind of like a dark red color that you want to use, or like a red brown color, it would work just fine for this. There's not one magic set that you have to buy. You can use the recipe that I'm going to share with you today, or you can find something really close. The point is, you want to use a bright pink as a zenithal from above, and a dark red as a shadow from below. It doesn't have to be specifically fuchsia or violet purple or blue violet. It can be any shade of pink. Now, after we have her pink tones and the shadow tones down, next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our base flesh tone, which in this case I believe is warm skin. I'm going to show you the entire recipe here after a little while, but just note that we're starting with our base color in flesh, and it's a very warm skin tone. Okay, and you can see how I still kept the zenithal. I did not spray into the shadow areas. You can see how quickly I can do her face there just by spraying with a zenithal. The next thing I do is I use a light skin tone, which is still a warm skin tone, but it's a little bit lighter than just warm skin tone. And again, if you take notice, I'm keeping my airbrush at an angle that's spraying down towards my model, which is in the upright position, because what that's doing is it's allowing me to spray in a zenithal type of pattern, which means I'm creating natural highlights on the surfaces that are pointing upwards as if we're in a natural light. So once we do that, then we can start looking at our shadows. And what you can see I'm doing here is I'm taking this dark nude pink color and I'm going in all the shadowed areas. Now, this might not look the greatest right now because I'm doing it a little bit overkill, if you will, and you'll see how I'm going to correct that here in a moment. But I wanted to make sure I got some good shadows so that I created the right amount of contrast that I wanted. And again, this is like a dark nude pink color, it's called. And again, I'll show you the recipe. The pieces are actually there, but I'm going to show you here in a moment what it looks like. But there you can see how we've created the shadows. And it really adds a lot of contrast and depth to our model. And that's why we want to make sure that we use the light skin tones from above to create that zenithal, and we use the dark skin tones from below to create those shadows. It's very, very important. So after I created the shadows, I decided to go back over it with the lighter skin tone to kind of blend those edges a little bit. That way my shadows weren't overdone. Here is that formula. So obviously I started with the white and the skin ink that I mentioned, and then you can see the fuchsia or any kind of pink color, a warm skin tone, light skin, and dark nude pink. If you're a collector or an artist, check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com, where you can browse a growing library of over 400 models to choose from. I'd love the opportunity to print and paint a model to add to your collection. Unpainted kits are also available for purchase. For commission requests, send an email to relentlessstorm7@gmail.com and I'll be happy to work with you. Be sure to use code STORMYT2024 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. I also have listings on eBay and Etsy, but my entire library can only be found on my Shopify site, relentlessstormmodels.com. With the skin tones out of the way, we can focus on her details. Now, there's a lot of details on this model, and it's not that there's a lot of different details, there's just a lot of details that require hand painting. And whenever we switch to hand painting, things take a little bit longer. We have to be a lot more careful, and we have to handle our models. So one important step that I did not show here is once the skin tones were down, I actually put a satin varnish on to protect it while I'm handling it. And I do always wear a glove on the hand that I'm actually holding the model with. So As you can see, there's a lot of vines on her body, so there's a lot of hand painting of those vines. And I'm using the same colors as I used on the base. I am using the Citadel contrast paints, and there you can see I'm using orc flesh. That's the color I used for all of those vines. Then, once we got through all the vines, which was a very lengthy process, as I mentioned, probably a good 8 to 10 hours just on the vines alone, and then I probably spent another 2 hours on these leaves. And I really do like this Corandrus green that I've used from Citadel for the leaves. I've used this color back on Eve, and I've just used this color a lot since even making this model. I think I did it on the Polaris models that I did exclusive to my Patreon, and again, they just look so good. So you can see there's just a lot of little details on this model after all the skin tones. And I'll tell you that when I'm doing the skin tones with all that contrast, it can look a little funny. It can look a little weird, and you'll be like, man, that just doesn't look right. But you got to trust the process, because once you start painting all the details and the skin tones are obviously, there behind all of your other details and all your other colors, it just really pops. And that's what you want. Again, it's all about the contrast, because these models are very small, so you need to make them look larger than life, and the way you do that is adding contrast. It's really that simple. I've been doing that since I started modeling armor a while back. So here we can see what it looks like with all those pieces on. We can attach her feet, and then we can set this body on the base, and look how nice that all goes together. All the colors are matching, and that's another very important thing, is to make sure that you don't make anything too bright on your base, or else it'll distract from your main figure or your main model. You definitely don't want to do that. And here you can see all the shadows in all the right places. Now, for the main event, if you will, everyone likes to focus on the face, because that's where we're always drawn to on any one person. We always look at our face. And here we have her hair, so obviously we need to do that first. So you can see I'm just using the same color red as I did on the flowers before, and I'm dry brushing in the highlights. This is my favorite way to do hair. If you do not add contrast to hair, to me, it just never looks right having flat one colored hair. Dry brushing is a great technique to add some quick contrast. As you can see here on these flowers, what I'm doing is I'm just using a white on top of the black primer, and look how nice those look just without anything on them. And then when we paint them with the translucent red from Citadel, you can see how quickly we still gain the contrast, because it's black underneath and white on the tips, but it looks like a nice flower with lots of depth. And then we paint our green petals on, and we're good. Now let's do the portrait. I know everyone gets afraid of a portrait, but let me show you something really cool. If you want to add makeup like eyeshadow, do it first before you do anything else. Do it with a good airbrush. Don't try to brush paint it in. It will not look right. Do it with an airbrush, and airbrush in those eyeshadows. In this case, Poison Ivy, that I remember, always had green, because she's like green and red. Why red? I don't know. I've never seen Poison Ivy with red, but hey, it works. It looks nice. And we're using a nice, I think it's carmine red is what I've been using for lips as of late, and it looks really good. Another paint from AK. And there you can see just her lips and her eyeshadow. Now let's paint in the black of her eyebrows and also her eyelashes. You'll see I'm using a 0 paintbrush from Uptilung, by the way. This is a Marta Kalinsky brush 0. So you definitely want something fine, and you want something that allows paint to flow really well. And really, I'm kind of sad because this brush I've damaged since then. I had a little bit of an accident with super glue and ruined it. I had to get a second one in, and they're very hard to come by, and they're very expensive, but at the same time, good brushes are worth it when you find one that you really love. And this is one of those that I really love, because you can see how easy I can just apply all these details. And I'm just using like Vallejo black paint, so there's nothing really special about the paint, but it really is the brush. You can see here I'm using that same dark nude pink in the corners of her eyes to add in the parts of her eyes, like her tear ducts and the other parts of her eyes. I don't know the technical term for it. It's just the fleshy part of the eyes. And then you have the white of the eyes being put in. And remember, we put the fleshy part in, so kind of use that as an edge. And if you go over that edge with the white, obviously, actually you'd probably want to do that, because the idea is to make the white of the eye blend right against the fleshy part of the eye, just like a real thing. And I can't stress this enough. I've said it 100 times. one of the most important things to have, especially when you're doing a portrait, is reference photos. Have some reference photos of eyeballs of a face. Have something up in front of you so you can keep all the dimensions in check, like proportionality and things like that. And this is how you can do it real easy. You can see what I did there was I painted in where I'm going to put the iris as black. This makes things so much easier because if you look at an iris, it is slightly black around the edges. And then what I'm doing is I'm filling in the irises with the color. And I'm putting in 3 different shades of green. Just like anything else, start with your darkest color, work your way up to your lightest color. And what you're doing is you're trying to use very thin lines to essentially make like striations in there. You can try blending as well. There's plenty of different techniques to do eyes, and I am not perfect at them. So if you think that you can do better eyes, please, by all means, if you have a better technique, use it. This is me trying to paint on techniques, trying my painting techniques to paint eyes without using decals. I have decals, I just choose not to use them because I want to get better at making eyes. And the only way to get better at making eyes is practicing. So keep practicing, you'll get it. After we have all the colors of green in, then obviously we want to put in the pupils. So you can see in there the different shades of green that kind of give it a darker edge on the outside and kind of work lighter towards the middle a little bit until we get to the iris. And at any time, if you make a mistake, that's why it's nice to have black nearby, because you can easily just fix up your lines using a little bit of black paint. But here you can see I'm putting in those pupils. You're seeing this at real speed. This is not sped up, so it is a very slow and very careful process. And then you can see I'm going back with the green paint and I'm just cleaning up the lines a little bit. It's okay if you make a mistake, just go back and clean it up. Go back and reshape the eyes, the irises. It can be very, very challenging because you're trying to make a circle in a really small area. It's very small. So the last thing though I like to do, because I love this effect and I've seen it done before, is to take a little bit of white paint, just flat white, and put it on the same side right against the pupil. I like to do the left side and just put it in there, and that really, really brings it to life. Just look how nice that is. It actually looks like there's a reflection in her eye, and it makes it feel real. Because if you ever talk to someone, and maybe you'll notice this now, the next time you talk to somebody, look at their eye, you'll see a reflection in it. And how you can also really sell this effect is this last step, which is just putting a gloss varnish over the eyes and over her lips. It just makes it look really good. And once we have that face done, just look at how nice that face looks, we can put on her hair. And by the way, for anyone who designs models out there, please do them like this. I love how I can focus on that face and put the hair separately. So a great design choice again. And that's Poison Ivy. Alright folks, if you liked what you saw today, please leave me a like, and also don't forget to come out to my Patreon and support me there, and also check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com and add one of these pieces to your collection today. Hope to see you next week.